Good day. Gareth O'Shea John here, counterintuition.com. Thank you so much for listening to this one. It's not going to be too long, but potent nonetheless. This is going to be a simple, universal, logical argument that is absolutely impervious against the moral justification of the state. It's not possible. After listening to this, if you can listen to this, understand what I'm saying, and still make an argument that the state or the government is necessary or moral or the necessary evil type argument, if you can still do that after listening to this, and it won't take long, I will send you a copy of my book for free. And I'll also send you a 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollar note. It's yours. It's a gift. So that's I'm totally serious. I will send you that. Okay, so just leave comments or email me or whatever. But it cannot be done. I know it cannot be done, so I'm confident. I still want to send you a book, though. If you really want a book, let me know. Okay, so here it is. I have in my possession a half-liter carton of Coke. I got at McDonald's, okay? I exchanged money for it. I got a Coke. So most people would agree that that is a legitimate way of attaining property. Okay, this Coke is mine. So let's imagine a second person comes into the room right now, and they sit down and they say, Gareth, I don't believe in property rights. I don't believe in your property rights. So I'm just going to take the Coke. And I say, hold on, this is my Coke. And they say, yeah, but I don't believe in property rights, so I'm just going to take it. Now, let's say a third party, you walk in the room, and you're uncomfortable, let's say, with what's unfolding here. Because you also believe in property rights. You feel there's something absolutely wrong here, that somebody's trying to take my Coke. But if it came down to a moral argument, how would you do it? Because let's say the person trying to take my Coke, if it's true that they claim they don't believe in property rights, they're making an argument from their position, then it's not really, you couldn't really say it was immoral because they don't believe in property rights, right? So from my standpoint, because I believe in property rights, if I steal something, then that's immoral. But if somebody doesn't believe in property rights, then it's not necessarily immoral. You might still say there's something wrong with it, but you couldn't make an argument that says there's something wrong with what you're doing. You can say, it's unpleasant, I don't like what you're doing, I want to intervene, but you have no real grounds from a moral universal standpoint. What is the universal standard that you would appeal to in order to bring everything together and come up with the correct conclusion? Who should get the Coke, right? So how would you explain to the guy, if they say, I don't believe in property rights, how would you explain to them, no, Gareth should keep that Coke, that's his Coke? How would you do it? Okay? And of course, it's quite simple, really. It's almost a kind of a trick question, really, what I'm asking. So, the expression of ownership, the expression of property rights is control. It is the ability to dispose of a resource in whatever way you want. So, like right now, I can drink this Coke, I can give it to somebody else if I want, I can throw it away. That's what's fundamentally different about my relationship to the Coke to everybody else's. Because if somebody else takes it and throws it away, I'll be like, hey, jerk, I just bought that. Why are you throwing my Coke away? What are you doing? So they don't own it. By me saying I own it, that's me claiming that I get to control what happens to this Coke. So I get to pick it up, I get to drink it, whatever. So if somebody comes along and they say, I don't believe in property rights, and they grab my Coke, and then I grab my Coke, I'm like, no, that's my Coke, and we struggle and whatever, then the way that you would be able to settle it is that someone can say they don't believe in property rights and still believe in property rights without even knowing. And here's how it's done. Because the expression of ownership and property rights is control, someone can say, I don't believe in property rights, but if they still try to claim control of a thing, then they actually are saying they believe in property rights. You see, so it's an argument that falls completely down in on itself. And that's one of these universal ethical arguments. So you actually have a universal ethic that no matter what somebody believes, no matter what they tell you, no matter what religion or culture or where they come from, what age they are, it doesn't matter who they are, they cannot say, I don't believe in property rights and still try to control property. You see? Because by doing so, by trying to control property, they are expressly showing that they believe in property rights. So somebody who is really consistent with the idea, I don't believe in property rights, they would have to go to some cave somewhere and just live out the rest of their life huddling over in a corner. But even then, because it's they're controlling their body to get into the cave and to stay there, so they are actually claiming ownership of their body by doing that. So it's actually impossible. There is no logical way to argue against the existence of property. It cannot be done. It cannot be done. And this is, it blows my mind. Folks like Noam Chomsky and these guys, they they get it all right to talk about this and that and the state being evil and all this kind of stuff. And then they make these claims that there's no such thing as property. And it's like, I'm sorry, but what are you talking about? How can you make that claim and, have clothes on and walk around and even talk? Because you're controlling your mouth. This is property. This is what property is. That's what it means. Maybe they just don't know what it means, or they have some other weird abstract definition in order to, I don't know, be different or whatever. But, so the point is, here is one example of a universal ethic. It's something that no matter what anybody says, they don't have to speak the same language as you. They don't have to be from... Anyway, as long as they are claiming ownership of a thing, they are expressing there is such a thing as property rights. And by doing so, they would now have to follow in terms of figuring out whose property is which. How do we determine whose property is which? And of course, because I exchanged money for the coke and I own the coke now, by somebody grabbing it out of my hand, they would be stealing from me. Okay? So that's that. Now, if you can imagine that, let that sink in for a second. The fact that there is such a thing as a universal ethic, it doesn't need to be taught, it doesn't need to be shown. It's simply something that exists. It's something that happens all by itself, just throughout human interaction. It's just something that happens. It's just something that is evident. It's self-evident. It's something that just is completely apparent. Okay. If I could just shift gears slightly, but using the same concept. So you have a state or a government, okay, who, at its most fundamental level, at its most basic level, let's say the most minarchist of people, the most conservative, right-wing types who believe in the smallest government possible, okay, where they would boil it all down to, the one thing that every single person, except for the anarchists and some libertarians, could agree, is that the fundamental role of government is to protect property, or ultimately to stop theft and murder, because murder is a property right thing too. You have the right to your own body. If somebody to stab you, they're controlling your body in a way that you didn't consent to. So murder is fundamentally a property right problem, and theft, of course, is evidently very self-evidently a property right problem too. So for a government to say, we are here in order to stop theft and murder. Let's say they don't do anything else. Let's say the only thing they do is stop theft and murder. They don't do roads, they don't do healthcare, they don't do school, all that stuff. All they do is stop theft and murder. Yet, they have such a thing as taxation. What we have is one of these self-imploding arguments, okay? Because, so the government is there to stop theft and murder, but they are funded by theft and murder. Now, let me clarify what I mean they're funded by theft and murder. I'm not even necessarily talking about governments who go outside their own boundaries to blow other people up. What I'm talking about is taxation itself is based on the threat of theft and murder, or at least it is theft with the threat of further theft and murder. So let's say I don't pay my taxes this year, and I get an angry letter from the government saying, okay, you were late. I know it's probably more than a year, probably 4 years, something like that. And then they send me a letter saying, okay, we're fining you X amount of money because you didn't get your money in time. So that's the threat of theft, because they're tacking on a fine, right? And there was no contract ahead of time. I didn't consent to any of this ahead of time, like you would with a phone company or electricity company or whatever you would say, ahead of time, I'll pay late payment fees or whatever. I didn't do that with the government. So they're threatening me with theft. And then, should I resist further, so I don't pay the fines, I get a court letter, a summons, and I don't show up to the summons, the next stage is for policemen to come to my door. If I don't answer the door, all I'm doing is literally minding my own business, okay? So let's say I don't open the door, they bust the door down, they try and arrest me. If I resist further, at that point, they will shoot me, okay? Now, you don't have to go through with any of that stuff. Now, you say, that's really, really extreme. And of course, that's an extreme example. That doesn't happen often. But the reason it doesn't happen often is the same reason most people who get stolen from on the street don't get stabbed, even though there is the presence or at least the threat of the presence of a knife. Okay, so if somebody pulls you over in a dark alley somewhere and they say, give me your wallet or I'm going to cut you or I'm going to shoot you, whatever. It doesn't take much for people to hand over their wallet. Now, it wouldn't be right to say they're handing over their wallet, therefore it's not theft. No, you say it is theft because there was the threat of the knife. There was the threat of the negative ramifications, okay? So, for the government, just because they don't lock people up often or they don't fine people often, that's because people are capitulating. Now, as soon as people say no, you'd start to see the knife. You'd start to see people getting stabbed, so to speak. I mean, really, you see them getting locked up and getting all their money taken and in many cases killed, too, because, if people resisted, this is what would happen. So here we have the government who is supposedly there at its most fundamental level to stop theft and to stop murder, yet they are funded by theft and by murder. So the myth that government exists to do this thing, that the government originated to stop theft and murder, must then be false. In the same way that someone who says, I don't believe in property rights, yet they go to grab my Coke, that must also be false. Because if you don't believe in property rights, you wouldn't be grabbing my Coke. And therefore, if you thought there was some kind of universal principle where we shouldn't steal and murder, then you wouldn't steal and murder. And if I could go one step further and make a really, really bold statement, in that if your definition of government is an institution that is there to prevent murder and theft in a particular geographical landmass, then government has never existed. Because what we call government only exists because of theft and murder. They have to steal money in order to exist. There has never been a case in world history, as far as I can point out in history books, where a government has existed in order to prevent theft and murder. What they've existed to do is prevent everyone else from stealing and murdering, but they claim that they can steal and murder. So right now we're in a state of absolute anarchy, but there's one giant criminal organization who is stealing and murdering, and most everybody else isn't. Okay, so the fact that you steal and murder, but you tell everybody else they can't steal and murder, that's really just you saying, I don't believe that you have the right to steal and murder, but we do. And that's the same thing as somebody grabbing my Coke and saying, instead of them saying, I don't believe in property rights, what they're really saying is, I don't believe in your property rights. I believe in mine because here I am expressing it. I have the Coke in my hand. So the government say, or government officials say, murder and theft is wrong. What they're really saying is, it is wrong for all the civilians and citizens to kill and steal from each other, but it is not wrong for the government to do so. And here's one potential scenario how this might have come about. Rather than imagining that there's this random group of benevolent people who like to exercise control over people, let's just imagine that there's such a world where people who enjoy control over people are actually really, really good people. They say, here, let's protect a bunch of people and let's steal their money in order to do it. That's stupid. That's just so ridiculous. What actually, probably, let's just, and knowing the history, we can see how this might have evolved. We see the kings did make this claim that they were, somehow special and that they could do things that nobody else could. To now was just this kind of mythical 51% electorate or whatever of people who consent to somebody being in charge. Because we get to pick who steals from us, but we don't get to pick the fact that they steal from us or not. What's more likely is that we have a system of laws against stealing and against theft, because if we were to steal from each other, there would be less for the government to take. If we were to kill each other, it would be an unsafe environment. Businesses wouldn't start or wouldn't get as heavily invested in an area because crime would be too much of an issue, and the government wouldn't get as much money from taxation from these businesses. So we can see that the state actually has another reason why they might promote something that is otherwise a correct moral principle. For me to clarify here, it is not right to murder and steal. As a universal principle, this is the point. I believe this because I can't make any argument against it without looking like an idiot. Okay, so if stealing and murder is wrong, it's wrong universally. Nobody gets to do it. Making an argument that says, well, we don't want theft and murder, so we need the government to stop it. That's like saying, I don't want to have my Coke stolen from me, so I'm going to allow somebody to take it from me with the threat of stealing it from me, and should I not give it to them, they'll kill me. in order for them to protect my coke. That's like the stupidest argument in the world. The government does not stop theft and murder. They threaten people with theft and murder. They threaten people with murder in order to steal from them. Okay, this is the existence. The biggest threat of theft and murder in the whole wide world is the state. It's the government. And by threat I mean it's real. I mean they take money from everybody. They steal from everybody. There's very, very few people on earth who can get. I don't think there's anybody on earth except for politicians and public workers who get away with not being stolen from. I don't think there's nobody who doesn't get stolen from and doesn't have that impending threat of murder if you don't cooperate. So on that happy note, I think what I've done is I've shown that the government only promotes laws not because they're moral, not because they're universal, because if that was the case, they wouldn't be able to steal and kill. That rather than the government promoting laws that are correct because it's universal, they're promoting morality so that they can take more stuff. And I'm not saying that any of them are really consciously aware of this stuff. I don't think it's necessary to be consciously aware of this stuff. This is just how it works. This is what this system is. And there are people who align themselves in government, and there are people who try to stay far, far away from government. And none of the sides really know exactly what the problem is. But some people just find it more palatable to be in charge of everybody else. And those are the kind of people who support and involve themselves in government. And then there are some of us out here who respect morality not because a government official tells us, but because we inherently understand that theft and murder is incorrect. So if you can make an argument that is actually supportive of government, you can make a logical and universal argument that shows that the government is either moral or even just the necessary evil, quotation marks, then I will send you, as I said, a copy of my book and a 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollar note. It's in the post for you. You will get it. And as I said, even though you can't make an argument against it, which I know is absolutely certain, if you really want my book, I'll send it to you anyway. So do get in touch, leave comments. Head over to counterintuition.com, get loads more podcasts, loads more videos, articles, and you can get the book itself on Amazon. Like I said, if you don't have the money for it, that's cool. Just hit me up with an email. I'll send you a copy. I'd love to hear your feedback, and please do comment and like and subscribe and do everything that is possible to do to get involved with counterintuition.com. I'm Gareth O'Shea John. Thank you so much for listening. All the best. Bye.